episode of Detonation. I am your host, Steel Archer, and we are busy, as always, putting death out of business. And this is going to be really fantastic episode. Alex and Bobby are here. These are two very special people, very special men. We'll get it right over to them in a second, but first we have to thank our sponsor, that is Thrivous. You know the deal, people. You go into the description, you read the link, you share it out. It goes from $5 on an exponential curve to $160 for every time someone shares. That goes up and up and up. So you can go up to $160 worth of free Thrivous for just sharing the link. And Bobby and Alex, you two are entitled to this as well. When you go out, there's in the link description, you say thank you Thrivous, and you go into the running to compete for some free Thrivous. It's the best deal on the internet. Thank you, Thrivous, very much. And our other sponsor, I Am Transhuman, David Kelly. Out there, everybody, please check out I Am Transhuman. That campaign is exceptional. And thank you very much to I Am Transhuman for sponsoring this episode. Now, I'm going to shut up because I want Alex and Bobby to introduce themselves, because these are two, you guys haven't, our audience hasn't really seen these two before. Alex having a very special relationship with YouTube, and Bobby doing some excellent work as well. So let's just roll from left to right in no special order. Alex, can you please introduce yourself, who you are and what you're doing, and what your YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel is essentially the cheat sheet for anyone who wants to live forever and learn about transhumanism and all these exciting things. Can you introduce yourself to the audience and explain who you are, who, what, where, when, why, how?
Thank you, Steel. So my name's Alex. I run a YouTube channel called Transhumania. Link will probably be in the comments or the description, wherever. The focus of this channel is sort of I have this intellectual interest in transhumanism, and I'm trying to sort of organize the entire canon of futurist theory and sort of get the message out there to people who might be curious as to who we are, what we stand for, and what we seek to accomplish. And the way I've been doing that is I've been creating, let's call them micro documentaries about various technological strategies to put death out of business, so to speak. So that's essentially my focus. Bobby is embarking on a similar endeavor with a slightly different strategy. He's focused more on interviews. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks for having us on. So yeah, my name is Bobby Ridge. I started with a YouTube channel called Life Extension Research, and I plan on getting my master's in defeating death, essentially, in the lab. I met Alex recently, honestly 2 weeks ago, and we decided to partner with each other. He has a solid view count. And we both have done so much research in life extension. So we've been compiling interviews with various transhumanist scientists and eventually wealthy investors, and we'll probably post those maybe 3 months from now. And we're also making vlogs to explain all this in more detail. And it'd be really great to come on to Detonation more often, so we can give daily updates, because just every day really there's some new innovation to keep up with.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Talk about that.
We are very excited to have you here at Detonation, and we are moving towards a sort of a 24-hour news cycle for transhumanist news. We really encourage people like Alex, people like Bobby, to go out there into the world and help defeat death, to make YouTubes, to study, to explore, to go and get your degree, to do whatever you can. Whether you're a politician like Ben Zion, or you're the leader of the U.S. Transhumanist-Party, or you're someone like Denora Delphine, the Immortalist Club, or Ira Pastor, or David Wood, or Bill Andrews, or any of these, Bill Falloon, or Brent Nally doing great work out there, Rowan Horn. There's a host of people who are doing great work, and we want to encourage all of those people and this is why Detonation exists, so we can keep up with what people are doing and enlighten people across the network, because we're a global network, and it gets kind of complicated, and it's very quick. Yeah, we need to stay in tune with what's happening in the system. Fantastic. So let's go to motivations, Alex. Why are you motivated? Firstly, actually, I think the audience wants to know, what is the flag behind you? It's not anti-transhumanist action; it's something else. What does the flag behind you mean?
So there was a philosopher by the name of William Gillis, and he believed anarchist ideology goes much further than just abolishing like economic hierarchies within sort of capitalist framework. He believed there was something deeper at roots, this sort of enslavement to our biological drives, and we could sort of move beyond this divisive left-right paradigm and find common goals in everyone's sort of political intentions, and it sort of symbolizes the sort of rebellion against our own biology, so to speak.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say that's what it represents to some degree. It's just a dorm room flag. I should have just gotten maybe a Jamaican flag with a pot leaf like everybody else, but me being weird, I chose a different route. But yeah, so I'd say my motivations for starting this. So I'm still an undergrad student. My major is biochemistry, and I sort of in my studies, I uncovered this movement to sort of become masters of our own biochemistry, masters of our own biology. And so I sort of stumbled into transhumanism by accident, like watching a few of these YouTube videos, actually. And I essentially, that evolved into me starting a transhumanist group at my university.
Fantastic. And what type of success have you had with that? Are people very interested, or is it a bit kooky and weird, or what's going on? What's the story there?
So I would say it's definitely, there's some kooky weirdness. The purpose of my channel is to sort of keep one of our feet in a pragmatic reality, so to speak. See which parts of these, like where exactly the technology is, from like how obtainable is it economically, how obtainable is it in this like pragmatic standpoint. But I'd say I've had some success with my channel. I think my subscriber count is currently at 30,000, so clearly some people are interested, and I'm going to keep doing it. So as long as there are people who want to see this type of content, I'll keep making it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's fantastic. So Bobby, tell us about your motivations. Are you just interested in life, and that's why you're doing it? Is it just because you have to, because you're studying it, and your parents forced you? Like kind of like people get forced to be dentists, or what?
Yeah, man, I wish my parents forced me to study life extension research when I was younger. That would have been great. Yeah, they didn't really help me much at all with my education, but yeah, and started getting passionate about science in school while I was in college, and eventually learned about Aubrey Gray and Martine Rothblatt and Ray Kurzweil. Martine Rothblatt and Ray are like just such great people. Of course, Aubrey's awesome too. But once you learn about life extension research, it's really difficult to. Well, I don't know actually. Just to me, it was just so obvious, right? I was planning on becoming a neurologist while I was going through my undergrad, and I actually took the MCAT also, but the research was just way too fascinating, so I have to become a scientist. And so I never heard about this, right? I've never heard about the research of extending modeled organisms' lifespan, or brain-computer interface technologies throughout my entire undergrad career, and which is really odd. I didn't even hear anything about aging. I talked to all the gerontologists at Sac State, and none of them knew who Aubrey Gray was, even though he's like super famous. And he came out with the first hallmarks for aging, and and is doing great research. Well, so when you think about defeating death, and you're studying, pathologies and biomedicine, it's just really obvious that that's like an almost impossible task. That's at least a century away. But you take a look at the research, and it's actually like 10 or 20 years away. And we have stuff right now out that has a huge potential to help you live to like 150. So it was just the most exciting thing I've ever seen, and it's it just, captivated me, right? It was impossible not to think about it constantly. I call it clicking, actually. So it's really odd to me whenever I hear, various deathists or people who aren't excited about this, because it's like, what are you talking about? This is what we've all been working for freaking hundreds of years in medicine, to freaking defeat diseases and death. So, hopefully we can overcome these deathists, support. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of motivation for the deathists in a way. I mean, they come from political motivations to monetary motivations to a system alignment to to fears of overpopulation. Even though books like the population bomb were proved completely false and inaccurate. There's religious motivations in the fact that, well, if you don't die, you're going to miss out on heaven, things like this. So, there's a lot of motivating factors for deathists in a way. It's I kind of see why people put off the life extension stuff, especially in the earlier years, because when you're younger, you feel more invincible. You feel like everything's okay. You still have your whole life ahead of you, but then people hit that midlife crisis age, 40 years old or something, and it all starts to barrel down on them, that the finitity of it all, and that's when the depression comes in. That's when they buy a motorbike and they ride around America and toot their horn, So no, it's interesting, and we're really encouraged to see young people and a global network of young people who are very interested in this. Not just people like Aubrey de Grey, great people, Bill Andrews, etc. With telomeres and telomerase, which are the big ones, curing a lot of the age-related diseases, but young people as well who are waking up and are realizing and who are interested and are utilizing the tools and technologies of the internet, of this information sharing system. That's bringing about huge changes and helping to accelerate the amount of change. So fantastic to hear, Alex. You've just done recently. You've interacted with Rowan Horn a lot. You guys done 7-hour interviews over there, or 7-hour chats, or whatever.
We got a little carried away. That may or may not have been the drugs in my system, forcing me to talk a little more than I usually do. But that was if you're interested in a 7-hour long interview, you could go check that out on Rowan Horn's channel. I talk a little bit about finance there, as well as how we can get out of debt, how we can overcome the economic circumstances that surround especially our generation, and the housing crisis, real estate crisis we've been going into. On my channel, I have a few solutions for those as well. But I believe Rowan Horn was actually one of the founding inspirations for me to start a YouTube channel. I wondered if there are other people my age doing this, maybe I should be doing it too. So if you're, by any means, if you have a camera, you could start today if you wanted. If you're interested in this community, if you're interested in making content, I would recommend to anyone with a monicum of interest, intellectual.
Yeah, we're all involved.
Participate in Discord.
It'd be interesting to hear some bloggers share their passion for extending max lifespan, because it's a totally new way of thinking. Jim Stroll said it really well. He said it's a higher level of intelligence, really. It's the next step of humanity in intelligence. I thought that was really nice to hear that, because you really do feel a sense of enlightenment and just this serious drive once you really click and realize how truly important it is to defeat death. Scientifically.
What influence has the Huxley family had on either of you? This is an open question. A Huxley family, obviously Darwin's bulldog, essentially. This whole what influence, Alex? You seem like you want to talk about this. What influence has the Huxley family given you?
So the Huxley family is very interesting. They go way back to the 1800s. The four founding families of biology were the Spencers, the Darwin, and they were close family friends with the Huxleys and the Galtons. So some of these people might be very controversial. I suppose the Spencers, you might know Herbert Spencer, the father of social Darwinism, very, very controversial ideas, as well as Francis Galton, who was the father of eugenics, actually. and but the two most important, I'd say, would be, of course, Charles Darwin and his best friend Thomas Huxley. So Thomas Huxley, he was more of the extrovert of Darwin's group of friends. He pushed aggressively to get evolution taken seriously by the British academia at the time, which simply could not accept this idea that species are not concrete, species change over time. And eventually, Thomas had two grandkids, so Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley is probably the one you're the most familiar with if you've ever read Brave New World. And his half-brother, Julian Huxley, essentially his intellectual interests were the complete opposite. So where one saw a dystopia, the other saw a utopia, and it was very different takes on genetic engineering. Would you like to hear maybe some of the contrast between the two?
Yeah, I would. If anybody out there knows a game called Myst, it's a very old 90s game. It's like the two different brothers, right? One had they were both cheating, lying, conniving characters in the end of the game, but it's kind of that idea of two different brothers seeing two different scenarios of looking at the same thing. Sorry, continue. Yes.
No, I've played. That's a very good insight, actually. I would agree with that, but. Essentially, Aldous Huxley's view of these genetic bioinformatic, not necessarily bioinformatic, but this new view that genes, the manipulations of our biological development could be a bad thing. The genetic engineering, not necessarily at the DNA level, but at the sort of human development level, could be dangerous. So, for those who aren't familiar with Brave New World, it's a dystopian novel, and essentially it describes this very alienating future in which children are the idea of the family has been eliminated, and all these children are brainwashed from a young age with electroshock therapy and classical conditioning, like Pavlovian conditioning, to hate books and hate flowers, such that they would prefer to live in the city, and that they would shy away from books.
People reference that book, like
So I would say that was his very negative view. Julian Huxley, on the other hand, had a more utopian view of manipulating our biological development. He believed we were, in some sense, condemned to more suffering by fact that we live the way we do, and we could sort of regain control of our lives through sort of what we would consider directed evolution. And I think directed evolution was the first founding idea of transhumanism. Huxley eventually wrote a sort of a manifesto for transhumanism in which he used the word to describe us taking control of our own biology. And especially what really got me interested in this character was we could use this for overcoming the worst biological limitation of all, which I believe is the Hayflick limit, the finitude of our lifespan programmed into our very genetic code. So that's just my take on the Huxley brothers, and it relates to futurist theory.
Bobby, you opened us up on the Huxley family because you said it's kind of, Jim Stroll said it's kind of a higher state of evolution. If you think about it in the context of directed evolution, are you a fan of directed evolution? What do you see? Do you see transhumanism and this growing movement as directed evolution? Do you think that we can overcome our own limits through technology?
Oops.
Your sound is gone, Bobby.
On mute.
No, yeah.
You're back.
Not on mute. Cool. So, there's different definitions for evolution, right? There's a Darwinian definition, and then there's, but the actual definition today has changed a little bit, even from Darwin's definition. There's genetic drift and other things, but then people use the word evolution as in just like growth, right? Which is kind of like what the word transhumanism is, right? You transcend, humanism, human abilities. And so, we're not going to be doing Darwinianism. That's, immoral, right? Because Darwinianism means like, you have to kill off other people in order to strengthen.
If I could just jump in here, I want to, just for our audience to understand the contrast between Darwinism and social Darwinism, the contrast and eugenics. These three things are communicating very different perspectives as to human evolution. So if we start off with Darwinism, Darwinism is just the idea that populations change over time with varying gene flow, circumstances, environmental disasters creating selection pressures. There's no moral assertions within Darwinism whatsoever. It's when you get into social Darwinism and eugenics, which are also not the same thing, that's when you start getting into controversial territory. So Herbert Spencer, that figure I mentioned earlier, he was a fan of an economist called Thomas Malthus. And what Malthus believed was that if you have populations in a finite area with finite food production, you will exceed what's called the carrying capacity. And when that happens, mass die-offs will begin in this finite ecosystem. And his belief was that we should force the poor into crowded areas where plague can propagate easily, and then kill them off because of this. Because that way, the rich people who he believed were superior were selected by evolution to continue. Huxley, Julian Huxley, was very, very anti-social Darwinism. He was not a radical libertarian capitalist or anarcho-capitalist as some might have been misled to believe. He was actually more of he wasn't a communist either. He sought more of a middle way between the two. And then eugenics is something totally different. Instead of letting natural selection do the work or biasing the rich towards the poor, eugenics is the belief that the state should take control and promote the propagation of certain genes. So there's a very huge diversity of thought in all these supposedly Darwinian ideologies.
And for people out there who think that these ideas aren't very powerful, I mean, we talked about the population bomb, but also Nazi Germany, for example, the whole Lebensraum thing was all based on Thomas Malthus. It turned out to be incorrect. It was all Thomas Malthus.
So Darwinism is actually
go ahead.
Darwinism is actually highly immoral. We shouldn't use Darwinism as any way to propagate or augment ourselves, because it's based on killing each other and trying to spread an ideal, an optimal phenotype based on the environmental pressures.
If I could just jump in for a second. So the connection between the Nazis, this is very important that we educate the public about what Nazism's relationship was to Darwin. And essentially, at its core, Nazism claimed, these are Hitler's words, was that National Socialism is merely applied biology. This is very problematic, so to speak, essentially in the fact that the selection pressure, the selection of which genes were superior was very, very arbitrary, and it was essentially the biology of National Socialism was very a priori, and there was very little empiricism or sort of academic rigor within defining which genes were quote unquote superior. And once again, I'll say Darwinism has no moral assertions. It's just the observation that when you have three things, if you have variation, competition, and inheritance, if these things, not just biology, but any system, if these things are present, you will see dramatic changes depending on the degree of the presence of these things. Things could change very quickly. So
you don't think natural selection is immoral?
Natural, I wouldn't say there's nature is inherently moral or immoral. I think morality is an idea created by human beings. It's not. I don't want to say it's a social construct. I want to say it's a perspective construct, as in.
It's a product of consciousness and conscious thought.
It's also a product of the ecosystem. So if you'll notice around the world, we have very different cultures, and these cultures develop their morality with respect to their ecosystem. Now, here's where we get a little controversial, because is cannibalism moral? But you might say if you lived in a very harsh ecosystem, say a desert, where there was no food available, and they had a lottery for selecting one person to be eaten every year, one might say that's very immoral. But these people, the ecosystem, sort of plays a role in determining one's morality. And I think that's the blood and soil ideology of the National Socialists was an attempt to derive a political ideology from Darwinism, which I think is impossible. You can't derive an ought from an is. You cannot derive morality from science. And I fundamentally disagree with Bobby on the idea that Darwinism is inherently moral or immoral. I would, though we should be wary of using Darwinism, the acronym, when incorporated into political ideologies like National Socialism or social Darwinism.
Yeah, I don't think we haven't found any sort of like calculation or physics behind to really ground ethics.
Bobby, your sound is gone again. You're going a bit muffled.
My pinky was over my speaker. Sorry. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. So there's definitely no mathematics or physics that has grounded morals and ethics yet. I think we eventually will figure out how to calculate that. But for anyone to support natural selection as a way to augment humans.
Are you talking about eugenics?
Natural selection. So yeah, eugenics can be.
So here's the thing about eugenics. That word is very tricky. It has a history, and we should be wary that it has a history. But
but so the definition of natural selection.
There are certain contexts in which it can be used. We could reclaim the word, as in the way in which Huxley was trying to reclaim the word. He wasn't trying to.
Yeah.
Huxley was not referring to the genocide of human beings. He was his writings. Most of his writings were post World War II, and he was very aware of the Nazis. But even in spite of the Nazis, he became chair of the British Eugenics Society, and most of his work is actually in context of. Huxley was very pro-working class, and most of his eugenics work was in the context of plants, how we can make plants better. And the way he disagreed with the communists was that you can't be a purely Lamarckian. Lamarckian agriculture is fundamentally flawed in the sense that it completely ignores genetics. And what Huxley wanted to reincorporate eugenics into was this idea that we can take out universally agreed upon flaws within our biology. We can remove those through manipulation of biology. And I want to distinguish between positive eugenics and negative eugenics. Negative eugenics, I would say, is the suppression of certain genes, whereas positive eugenics would perhaps be the addition of certain genes that would improve one's quality of life. But it's also tricky in the sense that what the Chinese scientists are doing right now in an attempt to remove the BRCA1 gene, which is a breast cancer gene, as well as all these other genes related to HIV. I think it's very controversial to many people to use the word eugenics in this context because, like I said, the word has a history. But I fundamentally do think the Chinese are doing good work here, and that if the process can be refined and more rigorously tested academically, we could one day see a day where we've reclaimed the word eugenics and recontextualized it.
You really like that word.
A sense of human augmentation rather than.
We're definitely going to manipulate our genes. I mean, we already are manipulating our genes. There's plenty of FDA-approved trials that have that can cure cancer now through gene therapies. That they'll take out certain immune cells and they'll culture them, they'll genetically edit them so that they can attack cancer cells. I think there's like 2 or 3 cancers that have been FDA approved to be targeted by these gene therapies. And I can send you the literature later. Is this being live streamed?
Yes, we are live.
Okay. All right. So never mind. Because with our videos, we'll edit them later and we'll add in literature. But so there's.
Is there a book or something you wanted me to show the audience while you're talking?
So just a few companies or names of treatments like Chimera, I think, and I haven't read them in a while. I think Luxturna. There's a bunch of them. Bunch of gene therapies that have been FDA approved recently, and it's really an incredible defeat in science, and no one really, it hasn't been talked about too much, right? Everyone's so scared about genetically editing ourselves, but when it comes time to cure a disease, people change their minds pretty fast. But there's actually about to be a revolution in this area of gene therapies, right? And you talk to Bill Andrews, and he's working on telomerase and trying to extend telomeres, which is a type of genetic edit. But an FDA commissioner recently stated that there's going to be 10 to 20 cell and gene therapies FDA approved every year starting in 2025, which is going to be incredible, right? I mean, that's a massive amount of diseases wiped off the earth. And many gene therapies are extending animals' lifespans. So we should see something for aging over the next 10 years. And so that's a type of, eugenics, if you want to call it. I stay away from that word because, there's a lot of lay people out there. And, when everything Alex said probably went over their head, not to sound rude, but, that tends to happen. I've noticed to a lot of people.
I would agree with that fundamentally. I would say it's but there is it's not universal. This this aversion towards the word eugenics. I'd say it's present only in Western nations such as Australia, Europe, North America. The Japanese and the Chinese have a very different mindset when it comes to the word eugenics or the idea of genetic engineering. They did not have the same cultural history of purging based on ethnic groups in their history. So I would say there certainly are concerns when it comes to genetic engineering. How well can we perfect the CRISPR technology such that it does not insert genes into the middle of other genes and essentially leave the human worse off than when we intervened? And I think that's definitely cause for concern. We should perfect the technology before we start sort of biohacking in our basements, so to speak.
Yeah, dude.
But
China
I
has a lot
believe
of
the technology
has
has
in the pipeline.
I do believe the technology has great potential, and I believe history is fundamentally written by the winners. And if we are the winners of history, then I believe we can recontextualize the word eugenics to mean something more empowering for the human condition than as traditional.
I think China has like.
I'd say we could agree to disagree, so we can move on with the next topic.
Yeah, you're gonna get the eugenics tattooed on you. Next.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Cool.
it's like that in history, where a certain word for a while, after a traumatic event will carry some weight, and then eventually people forget and they move on, and as we go faster and faster into history, more and more dramatic events are being forgotten quicker and quicker as there are more and more amazing things happening. For example, people don't talk about the Soviet Union as much as they used to. I mean, they're talking about China, or they're talking about Russia, or they're talking about, but no one talks about the Soviet Union anymore. Less and less people are talking about World War II, and you don't hear anything about World War One anymore. It's completely forgotten. And then you go to Napoleonic Wars, and it's all ancient history at that point. So no, history is getting faster and moving on. And so yes, maybe there will be a reset in the vocabulary where a lot more scientific words become more useful and more meaningful as they develop generational distance between events, in the past, and what their actual meaning is. So no, it's a very exciting time. And I'm enjoying this conversation, and so is the audience a lot. Bobby, so tell us about neural interfacing. You said it's not very popular in the academic world. It is, why isn't this a topic? What's going on? I mean, they're getting strapped to MRI machines all the time, and there's a lot to do with electricity, and we're looking at computers more and more. But why the dearth of energy around actually inserting stuff into our brains, apart from maybe Neuralink, which is Elon Musk, right? So he's sort of bringing it to the fore a little bit. But apart from that, what's up with the dearth of activity there?
Yeah. Hopefully we can get Alex back. He sometimes earlier today he was having a tough time cutting in and out, but he usually jumps right back in. But yeah, I don't do. I focus more on trying to keep our biological bodies alive instead of like transferring consciousness, which brain-computer interface will help with that, with just keeping our bodies alive too. But a lot of people think that the only way to stay alive is to transfer your consciousness, which that's not the case. Sort of. There's a caveat. But there actually is quite a bit of research done on BCIs, brain-computer interface, just not direct neural interfaces, which is DNI, and that's like inserting a chip or something, where BCI is like an EGG or something, or EEG, where like you put on like a cap and like it just calculates the brainwaves. But this is actually, I think, the most important area of research that exists. And possibly ever exist, because a lot of people think that we're going to need to implant something, right? Like Elon Musk, showed his what they have so far, their robot, and you can tell they're inserting like electrodes inside, like the scalp or the brain tissue, I forget. They had that cool robot, and so you actually don't need to do that. Eventually, you'll actually eventually be able to do a long distance brain computer interface. Like even from a satellite, you'll be able to connect somebody and transfer their consciousness, probably even from the distance of like a satellite, which is terrifying because that means that somebody, people can hack other people's brains now, which is only about 15 years from now, 15, 20 years. And so that's going to be, the scariest thing, right? Like imagine somebody, this is the worst case scenario. Imagine somebody hacks your brain and they can keep your, facial muscles and your, your motor movements with your, your leg muscles and stuff the same, right? And your vocal cords and whatnot. So on the exterior, you seem normal, but interiorly, you're trapped in this hell. And that's going to be possible relatively soon, which means that's one of the big arguments for why we need complete surveillance, even on a neurological level. And so we're going to need like the government and companies and everyone to be involved, really, to be constantly surveying each other's brains to prevent us from getting hacked. And so it's like the scariest thing ever.
So is that the only security protocol? I mean, because you're talking about prime ministers and presidents of various countries, important people, people like people who have control of big companies like Facebook or big tech. Larry, this is huge. I mean, so the only security is people monitoring each other? I mean, is there any other security interfaces? Can we download any antivirus software? I mean, what's the other security interfaces
that's an excellent question, and I certainly don't have an answer completely. I mean, maybe you can like put on some like sort of hat or like full body suit that like disrupts signals, but
you're telling me the aluminium tinfoil people will be correct at some point.
Pretty much. And so the hackers are always thinking of unique ways to hack and get around security systems, and so we're going to all constantly be needing to do research on this and always be step ahead of some malevolent genius. And I think,
if I could just jump in for a second, I agree with a lot of what Bobby's saying, but we have very different political approaches to the use of neurotechnology. I would say Bobby is more on the state may do a lot of unnecessary, a lot of nasty things, but I believe Bobby thinks it's necessary for the state to monitor our conversations. I would take more of an anarchist perspective of neurotechnology. And it incorporates this idea of the blockchain, whereby which you can have decentralized control of cybernetic systems and decentralized security as well, in the sense that a police force will no longer be required to keep the population in line, because essentially you'll have a ledger that is distributed distributed peer-to-peer, in the sense that we could thwart any attempts to sort of hack our brains, by which we have an authentication system. And the authentication system is already used by Ethereum, Bitcoin, to sort of verify transactions. I believe that system can be applied to political organization as well, and that's I would say that's another possible way in which we could organize. I don't think this top-down surveillance system is necessary for advancing neurotechnology.
Brian Johnson.
We'll just agree to disagree.
Brian Johnson is developing what you just said. He wants to. So Brian Johnson, he's the founder of Kernel. I think he got really famous for making like I think like $100 million or $300 million by selling Braintree, and then so he invested like $100 million into Kernel, which is developing brain-computer interface tech, just like Neuralink. And so I heard him recently talking about somehow applying blockchain to that. But even blockchain can be hacked right now. We'll know who hacked it, right? So, and it might only take seconds to hack somebody, and dude, you don't want to be hacked, right, in your brain. Okay, like, I don't know if that sounds bad to you, but it could be so bad. You can enhance, all of your nociceptors.
I would say I'm very aware of Brian Johnson's company, but I might introduce you to another company called Urbit, which I'd suggest the audience should definitely look into. It's spelled URBIT, and what this is essentially if Bitcoin is the sort of a blockchain economy, and Ethereum is the blockchain legal system, then Urbit will be the blockchain land system. So essentially, you have this sort of decentralized method of land ownership. And it was the story behind Urbit. It's very interesting. There was a blogger by the name of Curtis Yarvin, or he goes by his pen name sometimes, Mencius Moldbug. And essentially, he was this very dystopian, like cyberpunk-esque, neo-reactionary thinker. But the company he founded has huge potential for redefining the way in which we socially organize. We'll have this blockchain ledger for organizing the countries, or probably not even countries, but sort of the local communities and how they'll develop in the future. So essentially, you'll be able to the Urbit system has these ideas called these central these central intersections called galaxies, and they go into smaller intersections called stars. And those go into even smaller intersections, planets, and then moons. And you can sort of create this digital land in which you can build your blockchain society. You can sort of for the first time in human history, you have an exit from the system of capital. You have an exit from the stratified social organization we experience in the modern world. And I think this has tremendous potential, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, whether you're a communist, fascist. This is your way to test your political ideas in practice.
Did you hear what I said about Colonel? Alex?
What's up?
Did you hear what I said about Colonel?
Yes, in the sense that I don't think Brian Johnson is he's yet to produce any concrete he's yet to produce any major releases in the sense that Elon Musk has with his studies on rat brains and monkey brains. Did you hear him talk about blockchain? Yes. So the idea of blockchain is, yes, blockchain can be hacked, but the consensus behind that is that it requires advanced forms of quantum computing technology, not even quantum annealing, but sort of the quantum superposition computing, which is
well, you can hack blockchain without quantum computers. You just will know who did it. And so, but I mean, it only takes.
Yes, exactly. Who did it? In that sense, the ledger can account for this intrusion and reorganize.
But you need something. You need something that's pretty much foolproof, right? Like
it depends on the level of sophistication, but it's essentially something you should look into is Urbit, and it's still also like Johnson's company in the development stage. Yeah. But there's a YouTuber by the name of Justin Murphy who did a fascinating interview with one of the Urbit engineers, and he didn't leak out all the company information, but he released the sort of operating protocol in which it could be used to create new societies underneath or over the current system, by which we can ignore it and sort of organize outside of the stratifying systems we have set up today. And I just think that's very interesting. But again, we'll agree to disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care like who does the surveillance, or if we figure out something else, then that'd be great. We just had to figure out how to prevent being hacked. I mean, that's really all we had to do.
So Bobby, explain to us what are why would we as a species put ourselves into this position? It's like, why would we build nuclear weapons, or why would we build chemical weapons, or chemicals that you could build chemical weapons? Why would we put ourselves in this position, and what benefit do we derive from exploration and brain hacking?
Dude, yeah, that's an excellent question. Why don't we
just hands off, leave it alone?
Yeah, make it illegal, right? Just like biochemical warfare and all that stuff. I mean, people still make biochemical weapons, but why don't we demolish Neuralink and Kernel and all these different companies developing BCI tech? So there's a few different reasons why we shouldn't. One of them is the technology is going to advance anyways, right? Somebody's eventually going to do it, and so it might as well be us, right? Might as well be the good guys. Hopefully we're good guys. And so you always want to be ahead of science. because then you can be the one who controls it and who can be as prepared as possible. A second reason is because we're going to first apply this to people who have diseases, with like Parkinson's and who are quadriplegics and etc. And then next, we'll be able to transfer our consciousness and upload information, which would make us super intelligence, which would be the greatest thing ever, right? So it's either going to be the greatest technology or the worst technology to ever exist. And it's not a matter of if we should do it, but it's going to happen. And it's a matter of how to steer the ship.
Alex,
Right.
jumping over to you, why should we interfere with the brain as it is? Why not just leave it alone? Why not make all this illegal and not take risks in this arena?
So my perspective on this comes from a very interesting man. His name is David Pearce. He's a philosopher from the UK, and I would say one of the first transhumanist philosophers. And he wrote this interesting text called The Hedonistic Imperative. And it's sort of a manifesto for how we can avoid suffering through the use of technology. Not just I would say the sense of physical pain, but other forms of suffering too, existential suffering, like mental disorders, feelings of anxiety. We can avoid all this through what he calls wireheading. And wireheading is essentially this idea that we can reprogram not just our DNA, but also our psychology. And essentially, what we do is we find what's called the neurocorrelates of, say, existential suffering or depression or bipolar disorder. And using this technology, all these Neuralink kernel, all these forms of wireheading, we can sort of redirect these neurocorrelates, maybe cancel them out or shut them down at will, such that we can live a more fulfilling life. We can have a higher hedonic threshold, as Pierce would call it.
Switching gears.
We actually just talked to David Pearce.
Sorry?
We actually just did an interview with David Pearce.
I have been trying to get him on my show as well. I think him and Nick Bostrom are two people that I really want to talk to.
We'll get you in contact with.
They were originally the partners in founding the World Transhumanist Association, which eventually became Humanity Plus, which is often confused with my channel because of the logo. So there's just dismantling that miscommunication there.
We're slated to have Natasha Vidamore on within the coming months, and I'll make sure she's friendly to the logo idea. Fantastic. Switching gears a little bit, Alex. Firstly, what is death anxiety, and why is it important that we sort of start to push out this idea of death anxiety? Why does death anxiety cause so much pain and harm?
These are excellent questions.
We have to understand this idea. We have to really trace back the history, the genealogy of how we came to be humans. Essentially, if you go back maybe 200,000 years, we were no different from any other hominid species. Then something interesting happened. The Lake Toba eruption. So the Lake Toba eruption, it was a volcanic winter, and it wiped out all the other hominid species, or at least most of them, and left a small group of survivors on the Horn of Africa, the most intelligent, survival-oriented humans. And essentially, later early on, we got the introduction of fire. I would say fire is the first technological development in our species as a whole. And this was set off a kind of chain reaction, whereby the fire could be used to cook meat, and the meat would be giving us more calories, and it leads to a calorie surplus for brain development. So using this calorie surplus, we began to develop our neocortex more than the other hominid species. And through this development of the neocortex, we gained this capability to understand abstract concepts like mathematics. The idea that things can be counted, this conception of the future is also an abstract concept that many other hominid species struggled to perfect. And another aspect of fire is it brought us closer together as organisms. We became a very social species. We huddled around the fire out of necessity that we killed the winter of this volcanic eruption. So essentially, what this led to was language, and what language could be used to describe is the past, the present, and the future. The future being the most interesting. Once we have an abstract understanding of the future, now we can foresee the idea that, oh crap, one day I will no longer exist. This was very unique to us as humans. You won't see a dog concerned about the future. You won't see any kind of animal being stressed about like the impending doom of their existence, the impending deconstruction of the very essence of who they are. And that was very unique to us as humans. So we were this first species to develop this idea of death anxiety. And what this did to us was it gave us another hurdle to try and get over. And the way we get over it is by creating social systems using this language to sort of make sense of death, sort of navigate around it. We find other avenues in which we channel our death anxiety, such that we deny inevitability of our death, and seek to create something that will outlast us. And this is what the anthropologist Ernest Becker, this is what he called culture. So it's interesting that religion, institutions, nationalism, all these sort of cultural systems are predicated on the idea that once we die, we will leave something behind, and that will be our immortality. That will be the way in which we become immortal. Now, of course, I think this is my personal bias here, but I am very opposed to this idea of living on through your work. I think it's a trick of the mind, sort of a repression of our death anxiety, a sort of denial of death, which is what the name of Ernest Becker's book is. And I think we need to refocus our priorities on where this death anxiety came from. Where did culture come from? Where did nationalism come from? Where did religion come from? If we find the root source of all these things, which I believe is the idea of the future, the idea of knowing we will die one day, and we seek to eliminate this death anxiety, I think we can refocus our nature as human beings.
It's very interesting to think about these other models of living as a form of transhumanism. Culture, for example, nationalism, artwork, music, these clothing, ideas, philosophy, religion, because they're all trying to transcend the struggles of an evolving species, of being.
Yes. I could, if I could comment on that for a second. I'm not necessarily opposed to religion or culture or any of these things we hold so dear. What I wish to seek is sort of I seek to establish a kind of genealogy of how these things came to be. You don't necessarily have to get rid of them or develop a kind of hatred or aversion towards them. Just understand that they all came from this core idea of wanting to eliminate, to deal with our death anxiety. And I think we can keep those things if we want. But I also think that what should be included in our culture is recognition that most of our problems come from death anxiety, and we should sort of mobilize as a people, as a species, to eliminating death once and for all, such that this anxiety, which causes so much evil in the world, so much hatred and division, that we can finally quell that, and then go on to living as we would have had we not developed death anxiety.
Yeah, and religion, you're talking about religion. Religion is the oldest structural reform in this way. I mean, ancient Egypt, the hieroglyphics, the fact that even there's solace in a hell in a way. If you're condemned to hell, well, you're not condemned to your consciousness fading out. At least there's something there, and there's solace in that. So if you're a good person or a bad person, either way you sort of win, because that death anxiety is such a horrible thing for a human species, because everything becomes nothing, and people don't like that. Bobby, you like the question, death anxiety. What is it? How do you see it? And how do you think it's impacted the species? And where are we going with it?
Yeah, man. That was probably the best argument I've ever heard anybody that supports going to hell. Yeah, man, it's going to be a really good business for psychologists soon, once life extension becomes mainstream. I remember when I first really clicked and realized and became really passionate about life extension. I remember the first time experiencing death anxiety, because we're always a couple feet away from death, right? We don't have self-driving cars yet. We don't have there's diseases everywhere. We don't have anything like what Dr. George Church is developing, which is this nanotechnology that it's like nanopores that you can go in a room and like, you know, wave it around, I guess, or something, and it'll tell you like where and how much, you know, viruses and diseases there are in the air, or, you know, or on the surface, or whatever. And we don't really have anything like that is democratized, or even, you know, in public spaces. So, but and dude, it's honestly, it can be pretty rough sometimes. You know, thinking about mortality when you're a life extensionist, you know, or an immortalist. You know, it's pretty scary. And you know, I definitely, I don't hang glide. You know, I don't do anything too scary like that. Which, like, you know, I'm not missing out on life, you know, by not hang gliding. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, you're gonna miss out on life. You know, and that's one reason for why death brings meaning. But it's like, okay, we just need to wait like 20 or 30 years until we have everything death proved, and then I can go do, you know, wrestle with some alligators or something, you know. But until then, like, you know, I'm gonna be doing what I probably would have been doing anyways. I'm gonna be doing research and, you know, hanging out with friends and you know, being healthy. So
you raise an interesting point, because, you know, Alex, you've been spending a lot of time with Rowan Horn, and Rowan Horn has a very interesting thing on his channel where he goes around and he interviews the general public on questions about life extension, and he gets a variety of answers. But Bobby, you kind of said it there. You know, he says, Rowan says, you know, if you had a magic button that would cure all these diseases and you could live forever and all this, would you push the button? And a lot of there's a few mixed responses, but sometimes there's the commonality that the finitude of life is what makes life worth living. And if you extend the life out longer and longer and longer, somehow the value of your life drops off to a point where it becomes a burden. You know, or that a different circumstance of life, for example, you're interfering with the process of going to heaven, and therefore, you know, that's why you wouldn't push the button, because you're excited to die because there's a better place anyway, and you're going to be missing out on there's an opportunity cost in living. So you know, why do you think people say this? You know, you use the example of hang gliding. Why do you think people say, if you don't go hang gliding, you're not putting your life at risk, therefore you're actually missing out on the point, which is life is fragile. You're not understanding the adrenaline rush. Why do you think people say that? Why do they like putting their life, dangling it in such a precarious manner as to have this evangelical moment of now life is worth living?
So
I mean, go ahead.
So this goes back to a philosopher by the name of Jean Baudrillard.
I'm going to go to the restroom fast, so
okay.
I'll be right back.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
So where were we?
Yep.
Oh, right. So this idea of hand gliding, the idea that you need to do these you need to have certain experiences and to sort of to fully live life, so to speak. Yep. I think this is a very flawed idea, and it goes back to what we call the society of the spectacle. So essentially, philosophers like Guy Debord and Jean Baudrillard figured out that our economy is moving from this sort of this economy of commodified labor, this economy of material possessions, to a new economy, an economy of experiences, an economy of images. And the way in which young people like myself, we call ourselves the Zoomers, or like Generation Z, whatever you want to call us, we have a very different mindset than the Boomers. We don't buy a whole bunch of things. We don't store them in our house. We don't hoard. We don't seek fancy cars that we can't pay off. Instead, we're more focused on consuming experiences, and then we put those experiences on Facebook, and we put them on Instagram, and even on Twitter. We try to we don't even social activism. Most social activists, so to speak, are not really engaged in changing the world as much as they're engaged in appearing that they're changing the world. They want all of the prestige for none of the work. But what this essentially means is that we have this economy of experiences, and you want to gather as many experiences as possible. And I think this goes back to Ernest Becker and death anxiety. These experiences, this Facebook, this Instagram, all those images are just another way to try and deny death. Like, oh, look at me hand gliding. This is going to live on long after I'm dead, this picture of me hand gliding. And I don't care that no one's going to give a shit about it, but as long as it's out there, I feel as though a piece of me has persisted beyond my actual existence. And I think what you mentioned earlier was this idea that, sure, culture and religion, all these things are great for people who are on their deathbed and have no hope. And I absolutely do support sort of this kind of reconciliation for people who are nearing the end of their lives, so to speak. But the reason I think death anxiety is so dangerous is because it creates these simulated economies of experiences, these economies of images. And I think refocusing on the source of our ills as death anxiety could, and our desire to eliminate death could sort of refocus our priorities, in the sense that we don't care so much about showing off or creating an existence beyond our death, as in we refocused on extending the length of our lives, which was originally the problem. So we're returning to the original problem. We're trying to solve the original problem. And whatever comes after that is just excess. It's
it's within our genes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, if you talk to any family unit, or women especially know this. It's you know, it's the notion of reproduction is built into the societal structure, and they kind of, women especially are well aware of this idea. That it's about reproduction, and that the children and the family structure, etc., is built up to transcend yourself. It's not about you anymore. It's about this perpetuating the species in a way. I think he's back. So yeah, no, it's very interesting. Death anxiety, and because humans are complicated creatures, who, you know, libertarians can bang on all they want. Nothing against libertarians, but humans are socially coordinated, socially structured species, and because they're complicated with complicated systems of society, this can become very dangerous when you're trying to live beyond who you are, because that's when you get the wars. That's when you get ideologies like the Soviet Union, or even capitalist America, where you have to invade Iraq, you know, for Christian causes or whatever, or other causes.
Or especially National Socialism, where they have this idea that if my genes persist on forever, I live forever. Another example of flawed ideas. If they've ever read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, it puts it into context that genes sort of have a mind of their own, and they're sort of manipulating us to doing these things, to create forms of death denial for ourselves. And I think we've sort of moved into this mindset where we're seeking an existence beyond our genes, beyond reproduction. We want our Dawkins calls it memetics, or memes, rather than genes. It's think of it as genetics of the mind. So the genetics of ideas. I think society is moving in the direction that we prefer that our psyche lives on, rather than our bodies. And you see that ever more increasing emphasis on a person's mind than on their body. Take, for example, the feminist movement and their idea of objectification, by which they're implying that you should love me for my memetics, not for my genetics. And I think we see this in all avenues of life, especially like the body positive movement. We are sort of beginning to privilege the mind over the body. I see that in all aspects of culture, and I think this will redefine the idea of reproduction, so to speak.
Yeah, we actually might have Richard Dawkins at our event. I'm talking to his coordinator right now, and we have a life extension event August 8th. Hopefully you can make it out there, man. That'd be awesome to have detonation there. But so you know, we're planning on having at least 2,000 people, but hopefully we can get like 4,000 or like more, because you know, we have the room. And so it's at the Sacramento Capitol in California, and you're in Australia though, so you're pretty far. But man, like if we get like solid amount of scientists and stuff, that'd be really cool to at least like live stream you in or something. And so like we'll have like debates among immortalists and deathists. I want to have like scientists speaking there. That'd be cool if I got like Bina 48 to show up and give a talk. But so Dr. Rich Dawkins, you know, hopefully he can go, because that'd really help, you know, influence other people to come. And you know, I really feel like that's the next step for atheism, right? Is life extension, and trying to help any religious person realize how important it is to stay alive, rather than accept death for whatever reason they, you know, pretend is real.
So this is really interesting. So are transhumanists essentially trying to fight their own biology? Is that what it comes down to? Is all these technologies, nanotechnology, cognitive technologies, biotechnologies, are they trying to fight their own inclination? Alex or Bobby,
I
whoever wants.
think there's a split happening in the transhumanist community. Two terms I'm hearing increasingly more are the terms bioconservative and neuroprogressive. So in a sense, transhumanism, the CMT is the definition of transhumanism, and the CMT says we should improve the human condition through technology. Well, what do we mean by that? Do we mean improving our genetics, our biological existence, or do we mean improving our memetics, our psychological existence? And I'd say the bioconservatives would say, I don't want to put my brain in a chip. I don't want to be this computer. I don't want to merge with AI. I just want to be me as myself, and all the transhumanism will go towards augmenting my genetics. And then these are the bioconservatives. I would put Rowan Horn in this category, Aubrey de Grey in this category. And then we have what's called the neuroprogressives, or like they're more focused on like post-humanism and the decentering of the human, the critique of the Anthropocene, sort of recognizing our unity with all things, recognizing that our consciousness is not inherently different from the rest of the universe. It's an idea called panpsychism, not for this talk, maybe another talk, but I do see this this divergence in the transhumanist community into these two separate movements. And what touch on what Bobby said earlier about religion, I don't necessarily think transhumanism is opposed to religion. I think it's the resurrection of religion, the reterritorialization of religion into a new context. Essentially, we have this idea of the all-loving God, which is AI. We have the idea of the devil, which is Rocco's Basilisk. We have the idea of your soul and mind, going to heaven, which is mind uploading, simulation heavens. Even transhumanists even have their own creation story. I would call it Bostrom's simulation argument. Bostrom wrote this paper that has been the best argument for religion in the past 1,000 years. So ever since not since Aquinas and Occam have we had as good arguments for religion as we do today. So I don't think transhumanism is the death of religion, but rather a recontextualization of it.
Well, the Holocene.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Bobby?
I just want to say something really fast, but that's it.
Yeah, please go.
Well, I just wanted to say that one thing, augmenting it, but yeah, I can definitely elaborate if you want.
Yeah, please elaborate.
So yeah, I don't think God is afraid of looking through the microscope. I heard that quote from this famous theist, I think Christian, and so I think religions, gods, right? They created science, right? That's what I think a lot of religious people think. So science is going to lead to the defeat of death, and I don't think Jesus or any of the other prodigies would be telling everyone to accept death, right? I'm pretty sure if they were alive today, they would tell us otherwise. But what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say the Holocene is over now, and that's where humanity. That's what humanity knows. That's where it's flourished. That's where all these technologies come from, and we're going to have to adapt to whatever post-Holocene world is coming. And we've kind of accelerated that push, and yeah, so we're going to have to adapt whether we like it or not. The age of abundant resources is over. The age of existential crises is coming around the corner, and we're going to have technological solutions to mitigate that. We're going the same way as the Romans, the Easter Islanders, the Mayans. We're on a planetary resource scarce mode now. And so we have to start managing resources, and we have to start figuring out how to adapt. And that starts with our own biology. That starts with our own incentive structure. That starts with our psychology and how we think about the world and how we interact with the world, and how quickly we can utilize ethical technologies and advanced technologies in order to mitigate these crises. And basically, the castle is being built, and everybody who's going to be on the outside is going to be left out with the crocodiles. That is, in a way, Darwinian evolution at play. I know you don't like Darwinian evolution, but that's kind of what it is. Yeah. That's kind of how the game rolls.
Yeah. We'll continue. That's not. Yeah. Sure. We'll see people dying off, but I think that's something we should actively fight against. And so, I think we need to end natural selection. And David Pierce talks about, I think it's called uplifting. Alex would know better than I do, but David Pierce, maybe Alex can elaborate on
Is this
David
uplifting
Pierce's,
animals as well?
Yes, so defeating natural selection and death for all organisms, and even augmenting their intelligence. Hopefully, Alex can elaborate.
So the idea of defeating natural selection, I find it very utopian because natural selection is present in all systems, not just biology. For example, even have you ever heard of Conway's Game of Life?
You said utopian?
A computer scientist by the name of Conway developed this system by which we have these pixels on the screen and we program rules into the system. And the rules, again, include variation, competition, and inheritance. And we could see sort of an ecosystem unfold on the screen with all these pixels lighting up and forming patterns. So I don't think evolution is unique to biology. What I think Bobby is trying to say is, can we eliminate natural selection within biology, but leave it alive in all other avenues? Because I think natural selection is what it's part of what allows species to progress. It doesn't necessarily have to be good or evil. It's just the way nature is. For example, culture or ideas, like the economy of ideas, is also natural selection. Bad memes die, good memes propagate. So internet memes would be pretty boring without natural selection. Memes would never die without natural selection. I don't think we should eliminate natural selection. What I think David Pierce was trying to say was we should eliminate natural selection in the context of biology only, because we don't like this system of evolution. It's a very slow
Dude,
system.
You don't want to save the memes, dude?
Save the memes. Hashtag save the memes. But like I said, this genetic evolution, it's extremely slow, and our genetic evolution is moving much faster. That's why we suffer so much, is because the evolution of our minds is faster than the evolution of our bodies. We can't catch up to the changes in culture. We can't contextualize this acceleration in the sense, and we can't understand our place in it unless we eliminate this the problems of our biology, which are causing climate change. One word
answer from both of you. What's the biggest technology in the last 300 years, Alex?
The steam engine.
Steam engine. Bobby?
Actually, let me change that. The printing press.
Computers.
Computers? All right, cool. Well, you look. Actually, talking about technology, Alex. Let's start with you. What is the most realistic technology coming in the next 5 or 10 years that you're super excited about? That's going to change a lot of stuff that people aren't talking about.
So in the I think I've already talked a little bit about the blockchain. I think this is revolutionary in the sense that we're going to recreate the internet. We're going to create a new internet, and it's going to be decentralized as it once was. We're not going to have these. There's the philosopher Nick Cernick, Cernick, I believe is how it's pronounced, wrote this book called Platform Capitalism, and how essentially the internet became re-centralized into all these online companies. I think we need the blockchain to fight against that and bring the power of the internet back to it. And I think blockchain is a way in which we can do this. I assume there's many people out there who don't like the idea of YouTube censorship or Facebook censorship or Twitter censorship. This is also a way in which we can once again thrive as a species, and we can take back control of the narrative. We can fight fake news. We can fight. It's like the same. Almost all media corporations are owned by five megacorps, five mega conglomerates, and they all give us the same view of reality. We can take back the narrative, and I think that's going to accelerate evolution. I think that's going to accelerate evolution in all other fields of technology. That's why that's the technology I'm the most excited about, is because if we can master that, we can see exponential growth in all avenues of human experience.
Alex, you don't. You seem to really like privacy. You don't like the idea of surveillance instead of surveillance.
Not necessarily attached to privacy per se, but I would assume a lot of people are, and the motivation for getting blockchain into the public consciousness will be a great motivation.
Privacy is going to be really difficult in the near future too. Even just like 10 years from now, it's going to be really difficult to be private. Just think about self-driving cars being everywhere, right? Constantly analyzing everything. Right? They can see like down to an ant. So
would you say that's your favorite technology in the next 10 years?
No. Life extension treatments are.
Okay.
And AI finding mimetics and stuff. But so self-driving cars, and then was that the question? What's the most exciting?
Question.
Okay.
What are you most excited about in the next 10 years, say, in technologically, like in What technology?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to say something about privacy, but the 10 years from now, we'll have life extension treatments on the market, and we'll have AI finding mimetics of these life extension treatments, and we'll probably find like you'll probably like a one-time injection or like something you ingest, maybe in like your drink, literally like probably just one time, 10 years from now, this treatment will be capable of help guaranteeing you like 150 years old. That might sound like extremely unlikely, and I bet most scientists would disagree with me, but I'm like probably one of the only people on this planet that's been actually collecting life extension treatments tested in animal models. The only website I know of doing that is Human Aging Genomics Resources, and even though they're very developed, they're literally missing almost every life extension study, which is kind of embarrassing, to be honest. It's like, what are you doing like over there? So, and I emailed them. I was like, dude, I'll help you find all of these. Like, it's not that difficult, but they're not emailing me back very much. Like, we talked a little bit, and they're really excited, but I'm sure he's really busy over there, the scientist. And so I say that because I'm one of the only people who really understands what the direction of these treatments are and how robust they're really going to be when they're translated into humans. And one of the main arguments against it is that we're not mice, or we're not worms, or flies, or yeast, right? Which is like, you could say that about all science, first off. But it's true, they're not perfect modeled organisms. But, oh shit. Fucking died. How annoying.
You all right? Did he? Should I call an ambulance?
I think you'll be okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that was going somewhere. That was going somewhere. He's around somewhere.
Oh, here he is.
Bobby, what happened?
Can you not hear the audio very well? Hey, how's my audio?
Yep, good. Yep. So you were saying
way.
you're one of the
Cool.
only people who can do what?
Yeah, sorry about that. Dude, we keep like cutting in and out. We literally Skyped earlier for like 3 hours, and like we had none of these problems. But for some reason, dude, freaking technical difficulties, man. We need to advance webcam technology or something. So I'm one of the only people who have actually read through a lot of these studies, and because I gathered together 700 studies that have demonstrated life extension in mice between 10% and 50%. And so, and I'm about to start collecting all the other model organisms. So people say, they're like, it's mice. The ratio is not going to translate. Which first off, the ratios have translated, and sometimes are even more robust, going up the more complex model organisms, right? Like yeast don't live as long as mice. But sometimes the life extension treatments only extend yeast lifespan by like 20%, but then you'll see like a 40% increase in mice. Okay, so and the difference in living is pretty dramatic between those, and so that's really appealing, right? Because I always hear scientists tell me like, dude, mice only get like an extra year of life extension or an extra 8 months. Okay, so that's nothing compared to humans. And I'm like, first off, screw you, and no. I'm just kidding, but it's just one treatment. Okay, so there's like thousands of these treatments emerging, right? Different treatments with robust results in extending max lifespan. Okay, dude, if you have something that can extend your lifespan by just a year, like for mice, you combine and let's just say you combine like 100 of them, and you only get 10 years extra. Okay, first off, that's better than any freaking treatment out there. An extra 10 years in a max lifespan, right? Better than anything we have. But we shouldn't feel confident that that's all that's going to happen.
Are you in contact with the BioViva team and Liz Parrish and Mice Squared and all that stuff? Are you in contact with these people?
Yeah, man. Yeah, we really Alex and I really need to collaborate a lot more because, I'll get you in contact with like David Pierce, for example. You said you wanted to talk to him, and I don't know if you talked to Liz Parrish yet. Have you? Because I saw you talk to Bill Andrews, and so yeah, we have a talk with Liz Parrish pretty soon also. And I talked to her like a couple years ago, but I wasn't very prepared back then. And so our next talk should be really good, and we'll tell her to contact you also. But she's been doing some really cool stuff over there. Why were you
She's
asking?
patient zero. She's an inspiration to people around the world, to many people. Being a lab rat essentially, and I don't know. I've seen lots of people who went to Radfest, and they all came back with the reports saying that she's looking better than ever.
Oh yeah, she looks
let's
good.
say maybe it worked.
Yeah, Liz is really pretty.
That's good. I actually have to run to another show, Bobby and Alex, but listen, I thank you both from the bottom of my heart, Bobby and Alex, for both coming on. Alex, I'm really, really excited to talk to you. Your channel is fantastic, and Bobby, you keep up the hard work, keep aggregating all those studies and going to those conferences and building connections. You're doing a great job over there as well, and we'll keep doing a job over here. We'll try and throw yourself into the report. Keep up with detonation stuff. We're supporting Benzion 2020. Zoltan Itzvan, the United States Transhumanist-Party, and all of these guys down here. TAF's campaign to stop killer robots. Kate Goes Tech, Project 222, Transpire Me. Thrivous, of course, a great sponsor. Talk Spectrum, CubeSpawn, very cool, 3D printing. And Tom Ross, who is the AI man. And I want to thank Thrivous for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, make sure you share this and say thank you, Thrivous, and follow the rules, and you'll get more and more money every episode. It's a fantastic deal. And thank you to I Am Transhuman for sponsoring this. And also, thank you to our Patreon supporters. That's Gennady Stolyarov, Chairman of the United States Transhumanist-Party, David Shoemaker. I hope you are doing well there in New Zealand, sir. We always we'll get a report from him later in March. Everybody's looking forward to that. And the superfan Mike DeVerde as well for doing such a great job. Every single episode you do a great job, sir. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bobby. We will see you again really shortly. Do not be afraid to come on a show whenever you want. Platform is yours. We thank you so much. That's a detonation where we are busy putting death out of business.
Yeah, I look forward to living with all you forever.
Sounds good. That's the Reaper.